It is the evening of the 26th day of NaNowrimo. I haven't written anything yet today, but I only have to do like 620 something words anyway to be on track for only doing 1,000 words for the rest of the month to hit 50,000, so I'm not real stressed about that for once. By the way, if I happen to be twitching in this video, I apologize. It's because I've got a TENS unit hooked up to my back and it's electrocuting me, so I might like twitch or something like this throughout the video. So please disregard that. Anyway, this is a video that I promised about some of the things that you're not supposed to do during Nano that I do a lot and that I'm totally guilty of, but I haven't found actually hurt my progress. First things first, we're going to dive into the biggest no-no that tends to be said for NaNowrimo, and that is not editing as you go. Now, I do edit as I go to some extent, but I'm not doing like line edits or anything like that. I'm not getting sucked into wording or any of that nonsense. It's really just more that, well, I'll show you what it is. Here, I'll show you what it is. All right, so right here you can see my first 2 pages that I have for my manuscript without any of the actual writing on it. I'll show you how this looks in the actual text shortly, but I'm going to kind of zoom out a little bit for that so that you're not reading my horrible first draft writing. But anyway, what I do as far as editing in this is that I put notes for myself in the text and highlight them as I'm realizing that things are going to need to change. These are typically the kind of notes that one might add when you're doing your first read through on your second draft. But seeing as I already know that they're going to need work, I pretty much have my second draft notes out of the way for the most part. I usually call it draft 1.5 because I put these notes first, then I go through right after draft 1 is finished, or I take a short break after draft 1 is finished. I go through and I fix all the things that I already know are going to need to be fixed because I put notes. And as you can see, I do pink for any continuity errors, story, direction issues, or plot holes. Yellow for adding a whole scene, world building, or setting the scene, because I tend to skip those things a lot. But I'll just put a brief note for myself when I skip them saying, I need to set the scene here, but I didn't do it right now, basically. And then green is for adding detail or making the scene work. Or for making the scene work. And what I mean by that is, like, if I say in one scene that, for example, I had one exactly like this, is where I say in the scene that somebody was talking into their headset in one scene, but they don't have a headset. What I actually have them talking into is this wristwatch communicator that they have, and that's kind of pivotal to the plot, and I forgot about that in the beginning and started writing it like they talk into a headset instead of the wristwatch, but it needs to be the wristwatch because that comes up later in the story. So once I realized that I had done that and I started writing a scene with the communicator, I wrote a quick note for myself, go back and add the detail that this is a wristwatch, not a headset or something. So I guess that's kind of changing a detail, but I also needed to make sure that I added that they have this particular type of technology. So that's in there. And then blue I have for fact checking or research. So for example, I have one in a later chapter where I was talking about a certain type of weapon, and I'm actually not totally familiar with that type of weapon. So I put a little note for myself saying, need to research fully automatic weapons and what would be a typical rate of rate of fire for like the really fast, scary kind of guns and stuff, because that's gonna be important later. And then purple, you probably can't read that. Purple is just where I know that my wording really sucks, or like if something needs to be smoothed out because basically it's not very clear or something, but I don't want to fidget with it at the moment. And then turquoise I use for real-time brainstorming. So like, for example, the other day I got totally off my outline, and I realized that my outline was no longer going to work and that I had to stay off my outline, but I still had to eventually get back to where I was going. So I went ahead and put a note for myself with a brief summary of brainstorming for what I needed to do for the next chapter, since it was no longer matching with my outline. So those are the notes that I put in, and then I will use those for my editing in draft 1.5 when I get to it. And I find that those are really, really helpful. The other thing that I do as far as editing is concerned, and I can actually move you back up here, so I'll stop showing you that. All right, so the second type of editing that I do during Nano is not really editing. It just drives me bonkers, and I find it super distracting to see a bunch of red lines and blue lines on the page. So I will take a couple of minutes, usually at the end of like every chapter or so, or whenever I have a couple minutes where I'm taking a break from writing because I just did a word sprint or something, and I'll go through and I'll do my spelling corrections real quick for that. So those are two of the things that I do that are kind of editing based things. The other type of editing that I do is a little bit different, and I think I'm going to count that as something not so much as editing. Well, it kind of ties into the next thing we're going to talk about, so I'm going to talk to you about it right now, because it kind of counts as partially the going against the rule of not editing and partially against the rule of just keep moving forward. It doesn't matter how much this scene stinks or whatever, or if you get stuck or whatever, just press through it and keep going. So this one kind of qualifies for both of those, so I'm going to kind of try to be coherent about how I'm explaining this. So the other type of editing that I do during Nano, which does not hinder my progress in getting my words down, is what I call beef up editing or bulk up editing. I am an underwriter, big time, and I tend to completely skip scenes, or as I showed you, I have a lot of spots. Well, you didn't get to see all the spots that I have notes that say I need to add this detail here to make the scene work or whatever, but there's a lot of those. So what I will sometimes periodically do is every maybe 5 to 10 chapters or so, I will go back to the beginning. I'll pick a bunch of those ones that are highlighted in green, and I'll go in and I'll add that detail that needs to be added. Because it's not that I'm editing like I'm removing words, but I'm adding words. Or sometimes I'll go through and I'll go to the yellow ones, which are add a whole scene or add a chapter or whatever. I have one of those where I basically got to the end of the chapter and I didn't want to write the rest of it, so I said just finish this later. So sometimes I'll go back to those instead of pressing forward into the story, and I'm still adding words. In fact, I had 2 whole days so far this Nano that was me doing that, and I think both those days I was over the minimum word count, and I added like, I want to say it was like 3,300 words just to chapters 1 through 5 by doing that. So, and that was like 2 days worth of words that I did that for. The other reason I do that kind of goes with the other thing that they say not to do during Nano, and they say, don't look back at what you've already written, don't touch it, just keep pressing forward through the story till you're at the end. And I would love to agree with that, except for I totally can't. That doesn't work for me, because even though I outlined very, very thoroughly, I found myself at about halfway through the book getting stuck. And I had an epiphany as to why I get stuck at that point, because I got stuck at that point in my other story too, and I was just like, where do I go with this? This is getting off track. I don't know what I'm doing. And I realized what it is. It comes down to the fact that I am an underwriter and I tend to skip scenes and skip details and then come back to them later. Is that at the beginning, it's totally okay to keep pressing forward with my characters or whatever. But once we get to the middle, the stakes are pretty much being raised. And I need to know my characters better to know what the hell they would actually do. And if I skipped a bunch of scenes with them, or I skipped a bunch of details, or there's details that, or I basically need to do some bulk up editing where I'm just reading through and then adding more stuff in, I won't know the character, or I won't know the world well enough to really go forward in a productive way. And that's why I tend to get stuck. So that's when I recognize that I'm getting stuck, I loop back around, I go back to the beginning, I go through and I pick a bunch of those green ones and a bunch of those yellow ones that I had that say this is what you need to add, blah, blah, blah. And I go ahead and I add those scenes that are missing, or those scenes that needed to be set, or a piece of dialogue that I skipped because I didn't feel like writing that conversation or something. So I'm still getting words on the page. I'm still moving forward as far as the word count is concerned. And my second draft is going to be a lot easier because I'm not going to have to do that much. I'm going to get to do quite a bit less on my second draft. But I'm not really just plowing through the story regardless of the fact that I don't know where it's supposed to go because I don't know my characters and I don't know my world well enough. And I find that that really helps me come out with a more finished draft that isn't going to require like an entire rewrite, because halfway through, when I could have just taken a step back and gotten to know my characters and my world a little bit better before pressing forward. And by the way, I found that when I do that, the moment I go back to the place where I'd gotten stuck, everything's super clear and it's really easy to move forward. I did that the other day because I was getting stuck in kind of a middle of the novel slump. And I went back, did some world building slash character development by adding some scenes and details that I'd skipped. And then it was so easy to move forward past that point. So if you find yourself getting stuck, you might want to try that and see if maybe it's because if you are an underwriter, maybe you've skipped too much and maybe you don't know your characters well enough and how they would handle the higher stakes environment that they're now getting to. They're having to make tougher decisions and stuff. You're going to need to know them more than just generically by this point. So that's a tip that you might be able to try. Now, the other thing, the other thing that I don't completely break this rule, but I don't completely follow it either. They always say in a lot of videos, they say like, don't pace yourself at the beginning of Nano. Like, just, you're going to be the most excited at the beginning of Nano, so just get as much words on the page as you possibly can, as much as humanly possible with every waking moment of your day. And I don't completely break this, but I also don't fully follow it because burnout's a thing. Especially if you're me. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to say that I'm special or anything, but I work 50 to 60 hours weeks every week. I'm also the only one who cooks in my house. I'm also pretty close to the only one who cleans in my house. Except my hubby was really nice today and did the dishes and stuff, which was really a nice surprise to come home to. Anyway, but I'm a very busy person. And if I'm stacking all that overtime on top of also using every spare second I can for writing just to try to get a head start, I'm gonna be burnt out after the first week. So I do think that you should try to maybe get a little bit more words in and get a little bit ahead while you're most excited about it, which is usually about the first week of Nano. For most people, it is for me. But what I do is I tell myself in the first week, as long as I've hit the 667, if I don't feel like writing anymore for that day, as long as I've hit the minimum, I don't have to write anymore. Now, most of the days I end up writing quite a bit more than that, or at least a little bit more than that, so I do get ahead in the first week. As you can see in my chart, I'll show it again at the end of this video. Because I kind of like, I was a little bit above the line for the first week, then it went down to just being like right at the line, and now I'm back up above the line. Because I didn't burn myself out, and I just told myself, hey, if I'm feeling a little burnt out, cut back down to just the minimum. You can do just the minimum. You can always do that, but you don't have to press yourself to be above it. If you're not feeling it, then there's no point in making yourself hate writing altogether and then completely fall off the wagon and not do it at all. So that's a rule that I sort of kind of don't really follow because yes, I am more excited, so I tend to get more writing done in that first week, but I don't just break my back over it intentionally just because that's what they say to do. Oh, the other thing, and this is not so much a rule, this is just kind of a thing that everybody says about Nano, and they always say that you're not going to have a life during Nano. Like, tell your family they're going to be neglected, your house is going to be a wreck, you're not going to be taking care of your hygiene, you're not going to go out at all during Nano because you're going to be too busy writing and stuff. And I don't really follow that because one, I don't think that's necessary to completely neglect those things for Nano, because the word count goal is, the minimum word count goal is like 1,667. And if you are in fact not worrying about what you're writing for the most part, other than kind of like paying attention to what you're writing, but not like sitting there and like biting your nails over whether or not your words sound good, as long as you're actually like word sprinting and typing the entire time that you're spending during your writing, you should be able to get that 1600 done in an hour to an hour and a half, and that's even with taking little breaks between word sprints. I found that that works for me, and I'm not a fast typer, like at all. I think I'm like less than 60 words a minute or something like that. I don't know, last time I took one of those little online test things, I was less than 60 words a minute. But I've been kind of cheating and using my dictation software, so I don't know how fast that is. As you can tell, I talk kind of fast, so maybe that's why. But anyway, I don't really think that's true, nor do I think that is healthy. That's one of those things where, of course, you're gonna have less time to commit to those things like spending time with your family or keeping your house up or your hygiene and stuff. But that doesn't mean you have to completely neglect them. That's one of those things where you still need to make those things a priority. You just have to kind of adjust for the fact that you're going to have a little less time in the day, because that's going to have to be your writing time, and obviously that's going to take up a little bit of your time. Now, that sounds a little bit harsh on my part, and I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I don't have like big commitments like kids or anything. I just have a dog and a hubby, and I work like 50 to 60 hours a week, which I still don't think compares even close to having to have kids, because I worked as a nanny for 11 years, and I know that they're time consuming. They're great, but they're little Tasmanian devils, I'll be honest. But anyway, with that, I don't think that, I think my problem with that particular saying is where they say you're not gonna have a life during nano, I don't think it's a saying, but a lot of people say it, is that they say it almost like it's a way of giving themselves an excuse to totally drop those other things. They're like, oh, nope, I can't worry about like taking care of basic hygiene, it's nano. Or, oh no, hubby, I can't go on date night with you even though that's kind of important for our relationship, it's nano. Or, oh no, I can't clean up my kitchen or do my laundry, I'm just gonna have to be in dirty clothes because it's nano or something. And they say it more like, oh goody, I have this excuse to not get stuff done that I otherwise should be doing on a regular basis. And anyway, I just don't think that that's right. I think it's more of a matter of, yes, you have a little less time in the day, so yes, you spend a little less time on those things that you would typically do, but you don't completely abandon them during the month of November. Anyway, I think that's it for me. Oh, I did want to, I'm gonna show you real quick so that you can see how many notes I have, because I'm not gonna lie, I think at least like 10,000 of my word count, because I'll be honest, I'm using it towards my word count. That's the other reason why my notes don't hold me back from the nano goal, is because I use them in my word count, but a lot of times they are also a lot shorter notes than what I would actually be going back and adding. It's just quicker for me to quickly take a note and then come back to it on a later draft than to go back and add that whole scene. So it's not really cheating all that bad. But I'm gonna show you, and actually I've been told it's not cheating when I was on a live stream with, oh rats. Some of the other YouTubers on here. I was on a live stream and I asked, I'm like, is this considered cheating? They're like, no, I do that all the time. That's a great thing to do so that you don't forget that thing before you get to your first read through or anything like that. I'm like, oh, okay. I don't feel bad. So anyway, I'm just going to zoom out on this, and then I'm gonna videotape me scrolling through it for a little bit so you can see how many notes I have in there, because I have quite a few notes, and it's basically, like I said, this puts me like partway through draft 1.5 or draft 2. As far as the notes are done, I would just have to go through and make those edits, and then I've got a much more polished draft. And I'm ahead on that. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like if I scroll through that document a little bit, and you'll see how much is highlighted. All right, so there's my laptop, and as you can see, I've got my little color chart over here. I don't know I hope you can't read this because this is really bad. Anyway, so there we go. And I'm gonna scroll on through. Let's see if I can get this to work. And you can see any of the highlighted bits are little bits where I put tiny little notes for myself or whatever. And oh, by the way, the gray ones, if you're seeing the gray ones, those are ones that I went back in and I already fixed those details or added those scenes. These little gray ones right here. That's when I went back and did some of my beef up editing or my bulk up editing, and I already added those details, but I wasn't going to remove that note because I still am counting it towards my word count. I'm kind of cheating a little bit, but it's all for the greater good. And also, I didn't want to completely delete them because I wasn't entirely sure that I've smoothed out the details when I added that detail or that scene. So I wanted that still there so that if I get to some part and I'm like, why the hell is this like this? I have that there still as a note to be like, oh, okay, that's a change I already made. I just haven't smoothed it out. And if there's anything in that note that maybe I missed, or like a detail I still need to add, or something like that, then I still have that there to be able to fix it. So as you can see, I've got a lot of, the pink ones are for continuity errors and plot holes. Green ones are for adding details and scenes. Those gray ones are the green ones that I've now turned into gray. Yellow is add a scene. Blue is all these research ones. This one's a very research heavy chapter. And that's what that looks like. And oh dear God. That one was bad. I think I was struggling with my word count that day because I was getting stuck. So I had to do a lot of like, oh, I gotta go back and do this, and I gotta do this and that. And it's like, oh boy, this is really screwy. Oh, I remember which chapter that is. That's the one. I hated that chapter. It needs a lot of work. In fact, I need to basically rewrite that chapter because I realized later that it wasn't working for the one character. Anyway, but yeah, that's how I do that. And I don't really mess with those other than the green ones I might mess with, because if I get stuck, I might go back and add some of the details so that I have the story better figured out and I have it better in my mind what the characters have actually already gone through and such, so I can get into their heads better and understand their surroundings more. Anyway, I've gone on for a really long time. This is going to be a very long video, so I'm actually going to leave you alone now, and I hope everybody's having a great day. I hope some of these tips helped you, and you might find that they work if you use them in your process. One thing I might advise is just, if you are going to edit as you go during Nano, don't get caught up on word choice. Don't get caught up on line editing. Don't get caught up on little details of names for things or whatever. Just, if you're gonna do any editing, maybe clear up your red lines, clear up your blue lines, and then all the rest of the editing, if you're going to edit, should be adding words to the page. If you're not adding words to the page, don't do it. Period. Anyway, that's going to be it for now. I'm going to let you go. You guys have a great day. Bye.